Hi, Via the Soul family. My name is Erica Mock, and I'm Director of Communications here at the organization. And I'm here today with Dr. Wooten. He's our newest pediatrician, and we are recording a new Cafecito series for you to enjoy. Dr. Wooten, thanks for being here with us today.
My pleasure.
So, Dr. Wooten, I want to thank you for being here with us today with our Cafecito series for Valle del Sol. I know you're new to the Valle del Sol family, so can you tell us a little bit about yourself, all the work you've done in the community, and your work as a medical provider?
Well, I'm originally from Phoenix, Arizona, born and raised. I'm a true native. Went to college in Chicago at Northwestern University in chemical and biomedical engineering, and I was really blessed enough to finish college at 19. I went at 16, and I started medical school at 19, so I was extremely young. Still got that record of being the youngest doctor in the state of Arizona ever. I specialized in pediatrics and went and did my residency at Phoenix Hospital's affiliated pediatric program, which is for more or less Phoenix Children's now, but I predated the Phoenix Children's Hospital. And I always wanted to be a specialist in pediatrics. I really did a subspecialty in adolescent medicine and then did a partial fellowship in critical care pediatrics. I've been out practicing since the early 80s, and I actually set my office up initially right across the street from where I originally grew up in Matthew Henson Housing Project, 7th Avenue and Buckeye, right there in Memorial Hospital. That's where I grew up initially. Went to Maryville High School, and then I went to college from there. So I'm a true native. I've been practicing pediatrics for over 35 years, and the thing about it is that to do pediatric medicine, you have to have a love for children, obviously, but you have to have a zest and desire to make sure that their health care is what it needs to be, especially in the inner cities, and that's what my focus is.
Great. Well, welcome again to the Valle del Sol family. So you mentioned helping communities that are underserved, communities that don't have access to healthcare resources, and obviously that's a big part of what Valle del Sol does. So can you tell us a little bit about why it's important for families to seek healthcare for their children?
Well, the disparities of medicine, we talk about it. One of the things and one of the reasons I love being a part of Valle del Sol now is that I know that your mission is to take care of those people who are underserved. And because healthcare disparities hit us, those people who are underserved, those people of color more than anybody else. And with COVID, for instance, it's proven that it's showing you just how significant it is. And so if I'm going to make a difference in overall health of my people and of people of color, I have to be out there in the inner cities and the rural areas and really teach it, because unfortunately, we cannot rely on other means to make sure that those things get done. The media, for instance, and it's not doing a good enough job putting that message across. Unfortunately, previous leaders that we've had in the state as well as the country, I don't want to go into politics, but didn't do a very good job of doing that. We as healthcare providers, we have to be the ones to do it. And I have a passion and I have a burning desire to get it done. And I've been very blessed with overall good enough health to keep me pushing to do it. I tell my patients all the time, I have been practicing medicine over 35 years. I told you my history of growing up here, and believe it or not, I've never missed a day for illness, ever. And I think the reason why I've never missed a day for illness since elementary school is because God has put it in me to be a vessel for people who need my help from a medical standpoint. So I really enjoy being a part of Value because it allows me to do that little extra that I just can't do being a private practitioner in my office by myself. I just don't have that ability to get out. So splitting my time up in my private practice and with Value allows me to do that.
Great. Yeah, and you mentioned COVID, and obviously communities of color have suffered more from the pandemic, and that's basically the majority of our population here at Valle del Sol and the communities we serve. So can you tell us more about what you're seeing in the communities, especially around pediatric health?
It's almost, I don't want to use the term a nightmare, but it's been very shocking. Believe it or not, it's been like pulling teeth to get our people of color to get their vaccines. But what makes it worse, we usually in pediatric medicine in my practice, we usually run about 20 to 22% of the people who who need to get regular vaccines for their children opting out, saying, oh, I'm not going to get vaccines. For one reason or another, religious reasons, I don't want to do it. I heard the vaccines cause autism, which, again, that was actually it was a bigger lie than the big lie that we're talking about in this day and age. It's not, there's really no truth to that, but a physician put that out in the British journal Lancet back about a decade ago, and people ran with it. We found out that physician made up the data, ended up going to prison, actually. But people around the world believe that. There's a lot of myths out there. So people, for about 22%, would not get the vaccines. Believe it or not, since COVID hit, that number is up to 38% in my practice. 38% of people refuse to get regular routine vaccines for their children right now, compared to before COVID when it was about 22%. Why is that? Fear. People are so tuned to the internet, they're so into the social media, that all it takes is one person to say something that they want to attach to, and they'll run with that. And there's fear, there's great fear out there, and a disbelief in the vaccines, period. And the sad part of that is that most of the people who are refusing to get vaccines never saw the real diseases that the vaccines treat. People like me, I treated meningococcemia, meningitis. I've had to amputate a child's left arm and right arm and then pronounce them dead 2 weeks later because they had meningococcemia. I haven't seen a meningococcemia case in over 20 years now. But back in my early years, I saw them all the time. Why? Because of the vaccine. So people have been lulled to sleep. People who don't believe in the vaccines so much based on what they've heard don't understand what it was like before we had those vaccines. And I don't ever want to go back to that, but unfortunately, we're sliding backwards in medicine right now with regards to preventable disease, childhood preventable diseases. And that's really frightening.
So you talk about parents who are hesitant and fearful for their own reasons. Mm-hmm. So what do you tell those families to encourage them and to help them see that their children need to be vaccinated to protect them against this?
The best weapon I've had is my longevity and my being able to dispense some anecdotal information about my own experiences in my own office. Most of the parents that come see me trust me and believe me. So when I tell them about or show them pictures and tell them about kids I've treated with these diseases that have now been more or less eradicated, that usually is something that hits home. Just the scientific data, just to talk about what it is or what it's like. Some people have their minds so made up that even though you're pushing data to them, and they don't want to hear it. They have to see it. They have to feel it. I usually give one little quick story to all those people who don't want vaccinations. I usually give one story, and I'll tell it to you really quick because it's a story that just drives every point home about vaccination fear that you could drive home. I was last year, actually 2019, before COVID, I was talking to an African-American young couple who refused vaccinations in my office. And I was telling them about one vaccine in particular, Haemophilus influenza type B, the HIV vaccine. And I was telling them back when I first started practice, I was seeing 1 to 2 kids a month in my practice with Haemophilus influenza type B meningitis. Ended up having to hospitalize them for 14 days, IV antibiotics. 1 to 2 of those kids, to make a long story short, would die in a year. So I would lose 1 to 2 kids a year with that disease, or they have severe morbidity, blindness, loss of a limb, etc. In 1986, 87, that was the case. In 1993, we were pretty much globally using the Haemophilus influenza type B in vaccination. Since 1993 to 2019, had no cases. Now I was seeing 1 or 2 a month, no cases. And this is a story I was telling this young couple. While I was telling them that story, I get a call. I'm in the examining room with them and their child. I get a call from Phoenix Children's Hospital. My medical assistant says, Dr. Wooten, they need you immediately. Get on the phone with them. And they say, Dr. Wooten, we hate to tell you, but one of your kids is here in level 1 trauma. I'm thinking my 18-month-old. I'm thinking that she got hit by a car, gunshot wound, unfortunately, whatever. No, Dr. Wooten, she's brain dead. I said, brain dead? What do you mean brain dead? Why? How? Haemophilus influenza type B meningitis. Now, why is that important? Because a year earlier, I was given that same family that talk about why the vaccine's important and they refused to get them. And this was another African-American family who at 18 months, this child at 18 months, lost their child. While I was talking to another African-American family about how I hadn't had a case since 1993. And I had a case the exact same time I was talking to that family. Now, if that story alone doesn't make a young couple, a family, understand the importance of vaccines, nothing will. And I tell people that story now religiously because, of course, that family did get the vaccine too, by the way. You ought to see the look on their face. I said, I was devastated because I had to go to the hospital and help this family mourn. And while I'm helping the family mourn, I'm looking at them and I know they know what I'm thinking. Had you just listened and had your child vaccinated, this probably wouldn't be the case. It's the hardest thing in the world to pronounce a child that was totally preventable. And unfortunately, I've had to do it more than once. So I'm so passionate about it that the parents need to understand this is no playtime, this is not a joke. There's no incentive for physicians to tell you to get vaccinations. That's another myth. Oh, you're making money off them. No, we actually lose money with vaccinations that we give in our office. It's about safety and health. And until we get to that point, I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. So hopefully, we're posting these conversations on social media. So I'm hoping a lot of families hear your message, or they can come in and bring their children to see you or any of our other providers to have that conversation, because sometimes that's what it takes, making an appointment, coming to see you or any other provider and asking those questions and deciding if it's truly something their family wants to do. So even with COVID, we saw a lot of families weren't able to go to their providers for one reason or another. So that's another reason why we know children fell back on their vaccine records. What do you tell families now that we're getting ready to start the school year? We need them to come in for wellness checks, get updated on their vaccines. So can you talk to us a little more about that?
It's more important now to have your children evaluated, examined, seen, and vaccinated than it ever has been before in their lives, no matter what age they are. That's how important it is right now. Because, I'm sure you've heard that we have the COVID variant now, rearing its ugly head. And unfortunately, the percentage of people involved with the COVID variant is much higher than younger people now. So you're having younger people being hospitalized. I think we have 8 in the ICU in the South right now, in a state that's voting not to advertise given the COVID vaccination. Their legislator, you heard, your legislators pull the plug on advertising. They don't want to advertise to get vaccinations of any kind to children for whatever reason. Well, we now have to understand it is so important now to have your children evaluated, routine physical, let us put our ears on them and have their vaccinations, because we're going to, unfortunately, if we don't do this and do it correctly, we're going to have a rebound. And the rebound is going to be mostly with the younger people, not the older people over 65. It's going to be with the younger people. And when these younger people start dying, when anyone dies, it's bad enough. But when a 75 or 80-year-old dies, people feel bad, but they had a good life. When a 14-year-old dies, it hits you extra hard. And it's going to happen if we don't get diligent about doing what we need to do.
Yeah, and we know right now the COVID vaccine is available for people, or some of the vaccines are available for 12-year-old and up. So what's your recommendation for families who have little ones? I have a 2-year-old daughter who obviously can't be vaccinated right now against COVID, but what's your recommendation for those families?
First of all, everybody who can't get the vaccine, so the older siblings, 12 and up, need to get it. The beautiful thing about smaller children, they have a passive immunity. Your immune system is still being worked on, still being geared up. They attach to anything. That's why we know of this concept of herd immunity. It works great, especially in smaller children. We know that if we get their older siblings and the parents all vaccinated, the risk to the smaller child is minimal. So that's the bottom line. When it comes to school age, 5, 6-year-olds, the way it's looking now with the way people are being as far as not getting the vaccination, I think we all should be back in school. I really believe that. But I think the kids should wear a mask right now. I really believe that for at least the next 3 to 4 months, which would take you 2 months or so into the school year. The way the variant is and the way people are being without getting their vaccinations and pulling back, I think kids going to school and kids in school, let them go, let them be themselves, let them be with a mask on. It will not hurt, and it certainly will help. That's why I tell parents.
No, that's great recommendation, because we're hearing that a lot, keep using hand sanitizer, washing your hands, wearing your mask. So we all need to continue being cautious. Mm-hmm. And as far as kids getting back to school, besides vaccines, what other things can parents look for? I know in the last year with the pandemic, their children were going through a lot of emotional and behavioral issues. So what do you see there, and what's...
Well, that's, again, the reason why they have to go back. In my opinion, they have to get back to school. The psychosocial effect of this pandemic on children and adults, especially children in the age group of 8 to 20, it's been devastating. I had more cases of suicide attempts in 1 month than I had in the last 5 years in the month of December. It's been a nightmare. So we have to really be diligent with our children who are school age. As parents, we need to sit down, talk to them every day. How you doing? How you feeling? How was school? More so than you normally would do anyway, because you should do that anyway, but you should be really, really diligent on them, because it's a big readjustment period for them. This was I tell parents, this last 15, 16 months was the worst time that these children will ever have in their life. We adults had a hard time dealing with it, and we're adults. These children didn't know what hit them. All of a sudden, their whole world was upside down. Not being able to participate in sports with their peers, not being able to participate in dance class, not being able to took them totally out of their normal sphere. Now, as we reacclimate them to that, we need to be really much so on top of them, because we know that sometimes there's much more stress with the reacclimation than the removal of certain situations. Putting them back in that situation can be just as stressful or even more stressful. And we have to think about that. So as we get ready to go back to school, we're all happy and we're all thanking God that we're back in school, but we also have to be extremely diligent with our children now, more so than ever before.
And from your perspective, what are some of the signs parents can look for in case their children, because we know some people are better at hiding it than others. So what signs can parents look for?
Yeah, that's a great question. Withdrawal, all of a sudden the child's extremely quiet all the time, doesn't want to dialogue. Used to be around the dinner table at night, he'd be the first one to say something. Now he already says anything. You got to really look at that. A child who doesn't want to go out and hang out with his friends now that he has the ability to do so. But I don't want to do that. I don't want to go. I don't want to do that. When you have a lot of I don't want, I don't, that's when you do. Because that's when a child is telling you, give you one of the biggest signals that something's wrong. Of course, things like failed appetite, don't want to eat like they normally eat. He's a gordito, he's big, he's trying to lose weight. No, he's not trying to lose weight. He's depressed. He's not happy. Kids very rarely do you have a child school age who's trying to lose weight. You're trying to lose it for them and make them do it. They don't try to lose weight. They're having fun with their friends and they can care less what their weight is. If all of a sudden a child starts acting like he cares about his weight or I'm not eating, that's a problem. And there's things that are different than their norm, because one thing that a child will manifest right in front of you when they're having an issue. And if you're not receptive, the only way you don't see it is if you're not receptive to seeing it. If you're tuned into your child, you're going to see it. You're going to see a huge change quickly. They don't hide it real well. Adults become masters of hiding stuff. And people say, well, kids hide. No, they don't. Kids don't hide things real well. They really don't. If you just sit back and look and listen, they'll tell you. If you listen. If that auditory canal is open, you're going to hear. I really have a problem when people say, I would never have guessed. I didn't know. You weren't listening. You weren't paying attention. If the pediatrician in 15 minutes in the office can see it, you definitely should be able to see it at home. But you got to be attentive to it and listen. Listening and looking, but listening is the most important thing because they'll tell you in their own little way if you're listening for it. So that's really all I can say. That always remember that, behavior specialists are always available here. You always have the ability to talk to somebody. When in doubt, talk it out. That's one of my favorite little sayings that I just came up with last week. But no,
we'll get T-shirts.
Exactly. You got to, when in doubt, you talk it out. You just talk. While talking to your child, you'll hear it. You'll hear the warning signs come to you.
Yeah, and I think the beauty of Via del Sol is that we work hand in hand with our community members and try and provide services. Like you were saying, we have, people here who anyone can call and just talk to them. We now have 24 hours behavioral health services. So if someone's child is going through a moment of crisis, they can give us a call. They can get those services, those resources, and eventually, hopefully, book an appointment to come get further assistance. But it's so valuable in our community because we know people don't have, the normal 9-to-5 jobs, and people need after-hour care, of course. So it's great that between that and our mobile health unit that's going out and working with schools and in the community, we're able to provide access to families who need it. So it's so great, the work we're doing.
Yeah, that's good. That's one of the things I really love, the fact that you're able to go out into the communities. It's a huge thing, especially in this day and age right now. It needs to happen.
For people watching, is there anything else you want to say or remind them of as far as pediatric care goes?
Well, the biggest thing is that, your child is going to go through a transitional period. Last year and first part of this year, it's been something like I said earlier, they've never experienced before. And you got to keep that in mind when you're doing your disciplining, when you're dialoguing with them, that they've gone through a significant trauma. All of them. And no matter how well adjusted they appear to be, they're not really that well adjusted. And you need to start there. Because if you start there, you'll do much better with dealing with the problems, little issues that come up. But if you start up here thinking, that's fine, it is no problem, then you're going to overlook some things that are glaring, like what I was saying earlier, that are right in your face, and you're not going to hear it. And that's when the child gets in a dangerous situation. So for parents, just be attentive. But understand you're starting at ground zero now. You're starting at ground zero as far as their feelings, their emotions, their attachment. And when a child looks to be detached from their peers and yourself, then it's time to seek some help.
And I think the beauty of Via del Sol, kind of going back to your point, is that we also have support groups for parents. So I know, we're focusing on the health of our children, but we also need to understand that there's support for the parents.
That's huge.
Because sometimes parents don't know what they're doing. And I say that as a parent myself. So it's great that Via del Sol can provide support for parents so they can provide better resources and better attention and care for their children. So
that's a big deal. Yeah. That's huge.
Well,
didn't think about that. That's even better.
Yeah, so lots of support here at Via del Sol. So I'm hoping anyone watching this can, if they feel they need help, can give us a call. You are now seeing patients, so if they want to meet with you, they can give us a call to make an appointment. Yep. And we're out of time, but I want to thank you for being here with us today.
It's my pleasure.
We're glad to have you on board at the Via del Sol family and look forward to having more of these conversations with you.
Thank you. I'll be here.
Thanks.